During the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia, 3 pipe bombs exploded, killing 2 people and injuring 111 on July 27th. Those killed were a woman named Alice Hawthorne, who died shortly after the blast when one of the bomb's nails penetrated her skull. The other was a Turkish cameraman named Melih Uzunyol, who died of a heart attack while rushing to the scene. The world was stunned. Immediately, state, local, and federal authorities arrived and started their investigations, collecting bomb debris, interviewing potential witnesses, gathering statements, and reviewing surveillance camera footage to identify the bomber. The media was in a panic for a good story, and law enforcement authorities were under incredible pressure to solve the case. But mistakes were made. Who was Eric Rudolph? Why did he become a domestic terrorist? How many bombings was he responsible for? How did he justify his actions? How long did it take to catch him, and why? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Eric Robert Rudolph was born on September 19, 1966 in Merritt Island, Florida, to pacifist parents who first met protesting the Vietnam War. They were a devout Christian family, and they suffered the loss of the father, who died of cancer in 1981 when Rudolph was 15 years old. Rudolph blamed God and the government since they didn't approve an experimental drug that could have saved his father's life. After the death, his mother moved the family to Nantahala, North Carolina, where Rudolph's radicalization arguably began. Rudolph spent a lot of time with his neighbor, Thomas Wayne Branham, who detested the government and always kept an arsenal of weapons on hand, which was soon raided by the ATF when Rudolph was 17. By then, Rudolph had already dropped out of high school and was under Branham's influence, who convinced Rudolph to leave, and he spent 4 months with an anti-Semitic, racist, and homophobic preacher in Missouri. Rudolph returned to North Carolina to get his GED and attend college, but he dropped out to join the U.S. Army. Rudolph was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky with the 101st Airborne Division, as was your humble narrator, and received explosives training, but he was discharged for marijuana use in 1989. Afterward, he returned to Nantahala and worked as a carpenter while becoming increasingly paranoid about the government. Rudolph spent several years studying various types of white supremacy, anti-Semitism, and anti-gay groups, mostly Christian identity, a movement whose most fundamental teaching pivots on the idea that Anglo-Saxons are the direct descendants of the lost tribes of Israel and thus are the true chosen people of God, in essence a very distorted view of Christianity. In 1996, at age 29, Rudolph began using the aliases Bob Randolph and Bob Rudolph. It was at this time he began planning to bomb the Summer Olympics. As he said in his own words, the purpose of this attack was to confound, anger, and embarrass the Washington government in the eyes of the world for its abominable sanctioning of abortion on demand. Rudolph wore jeans and a blue short-sleeved shirt and carried a backpack containing 3 pipe bombs filled with gunpowder and nails, and placed them under a bench, then setting an alarm for 55 minutes and left. Then he made a 911 call from a nearby payphone, stating, "There is a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes." The 2 explosions went off, and following the previous explosion, security guard Richard Jewell had already noticed a suspicious bag and helped clear the immediate area of bystanders, and then flagged down Tom Davis of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, also working security that night. Davis immediately agreed that the bag was suspicious. After the bomb team confirmed their worst fears, Jewell and others ordered everyone in the area to evacuate. Soon the bag exploded at 1:25 a.m. and Jewell recalled what happened. "It knocked me forward and I fell down on my hands and knees. As I pushed myself back up, I looked to my right because that's where the blast came from. Those troopers that had been lined up with those benches were flying through the air. It had knocked them that far." Rudolph fled the scene, but witnesses described what would later turn out to be his pickup truck leave just before the last explosion. And then another major horror arose. Jewell was initially hailed as a hero for his quick thinking and saving lives, but he was soon viewed with suspicion, and then he was falsely accused by the law enforcement agencies and the media of plotting the attack himself to gain notoriety. Later, Jewell sued the media outlets and finally won several awards. And for example, the settlement with NBC was reportedly $500,000. The settlement with CNN was never disclosed, but the payment went to his mother for the harassment she endured. Within days, investigators questioned Jewell, searched the apartment he shared with his mother, and turned his apartment complex into the focal point of media attention. The American media and even law enforcement, desperate to have a suspect, accused an innocent man for 88 days, calling him the prime suspect. He lost his job and was harassed by the public who believed the false narrative. He even received death threats. Even after passing a polygraph test, Jewell lamented that his name was ruined. When Jewell was eventually cleared as a suspect and filed a lawsuit against the publisher of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Piedmont College, who employed him and fired him. Richard Jewell died in 2007 of natural causes, but his name was cleared. But Eric Rudolph was not finished, because while on the run he bombed an Atlanta abortion clinic, injuring 7 people, and an Atlanta abortion clinic was bombed again with no casualties. A lesbian nightclub was bombed, injuring 4 people. He bombed another abortion clinic in Birmingham, Alabama on January 29, 1998, which killed 35-year-old off-duty police officer Robert Sanderson. On January 29, 1998, the FBI amassed enough evidence to identify him, but by that point, the Atlanta bomber had already vanished into the Appalachian wilderness, where the FBI spent 5 years and $24 million trying to find him. The police had connected the dots since the night of the bombing, and that resulted in a federal warrant for his arrest being issued on February 14, 1998. But Rudolph's brother Daniel felt his family was being unfairly persecuted, not knowing what his brother had done, and bizarrely opted to cut his own left hand off with a circular saw in protest. The FBI placed Rudolph on their 10 most wanted list in May with a $1 million reward, and on October 14, 1998, Rudolph was formally charged with all 4 bombings. The manhunt was still ongoing and included bloodhounds, aircraft, motion and heat sensors, and hundreds of interviews with potential witnesses and informants. According to the FBI report, before Rudolph vanished, he was last seen at the Nantahala home of a health food store owner named George Nordman on July 7, 1998. Rudolph was there to ask for supplies and food. Nordman initially agreed to help him, but later changed his mind and reported him a few days later, knowing he was wanted. But to catch Rudolph required a new type of collaboration between local law enforcement and the federal bureaus like the FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. This began in earnest after the attacks on September 11, 2001, when federal officials started to share information with local law enforcement about extremist ideology and the whereabouts and behaviors of people they were looking for. The search for Rudolph was one example of why this collaboration was needed. Law enforcement believed that Rudolph was still in the area, hiding out in the Nantahala National Forest as a survivalist, but where exactly would he set up camp was anyone's guess. The public pressure on the feds was mounting, and they believed that he was receiving aid from the locals because they did not believe he could survive in the woods alone, so the FBI started applying pressure, increasing the tension. Assistant Police Chief Chris West said during an interview that the FBI is keeping it pretty hush. We could have given them help with the terrain, showing them spots they needed to check out, caves, caverns, old mountain homes, but they haven't even asked us. Local carpenter Doug Franklin recalled his impression of the police, quote, "It seemed to me like a farce more than anything else. They had coffee pots set up on the side of the road, and you'd see them sitting or standing there, and their uniforms were perfectly clean. No dirt on it, just a clean uniform. So that told me that they hadn't been very far out in the woods looking for him." Most of the locals and even local police openly wondered how much federal authorities were actually doing to find Rudolph, especially since many of them were unfamiliar with the local wilderness. Some even suggested that the FBI was really only there for publicity and training exercises. As time passed, many people believed that Rudolph had died at some point while he was on the run. This was because hundreds of agents combed the Nantahala National Forest, but by 2000, the manhunt had been scaled back, and by 2002, the search was essentially comprised of just a dozen agents. Rudolph had been living rough and resorted to taking food from trash dumpsters behind restaurants and hotels. That was when, on May 31st, 2003, a 21-year-old police rookie named Jeffrey Postel just happened to be driving by and saw what he thought was a homeless vagrant in a trash dumpster. When Postel arrested him, Rudolph identified himself as Jerry Wilson. He did not know that he had captured Eric Rudolph. It was only when they arrived at the station other cops looked at Rudolph's wanted poster and put two and two together. Rudolph then told them, "I'm Eric Robert Rudolph, and you've got me." The nation was shocked to hear that Rudolph had been caught, as his story had been relegated to the back pages of every newspaper and TV and radio news feed, which hardly ever mentioned him. He just fell off the news radar. However, the authorities wanted to know many things, such as how did he survive in the woods for so long? Did he have help? According to Rudolph, he spent time between a summer camp and a winter camp in different areas of the wilderness, hunting locally for food, or stole what he needed from homes and slept on the ground most nights. There was never any evidence of any assistance given to Rudolph, but law enforcement and even some locals think that he must have had at least one person helping him, which they believe would explain how he survived. After 2 years in custody, Rudolph agreed to a plea bargain. He would plead guilty to all 4 bombings and waive his appeals. In exchange, he would avoid the death penalty for the deaths that were a result of his bombings. And on July 18th, Rudolph was given 4 life sentences in 2005. Following his agreement 5 days later, Eric Rudolph explained in a statement that his bombings were meant to urge the government to outlaw abortions and to resist giving gay people more rights. Today, Eric Rudolph is still serving his life sentence at the ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado, where he will most likely die. Rudolph wrote a book in prison titled Between the Lines of Drift, The Memoirs of a Militant, which was published with help from his brother in February 2013. In April 2013, the U.S. Attorney General seized $200 from the sales of the book, which was not selling well, to help pay off the $1 million that Rudolph owed in restitution to the state of Alabama. The book has since been republished and has been made available through the Army of God website. Rudolph has said, "The truth is, I am a Christian." Well, Rudolph remained unremorseful for his actions and in a statement before the court called his acts against abortion providers a moral duty. He said, "As I go to a prison cell for a lifetime, I know that I have fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith." In his work, White Lies, Abortion, Eugenics, and Racism, Rudolph expresses his admirations towards Catholicism. But any Christian, regardless of denomination, knows that Eric Rudolph's interpretation of religion is a very distorted reality. Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.